Well, like I say, I took some time off.
Yep.
I got out the 2nd of February in 46, and I didn't go to work until the 28th of January 1947. Almost a year. And I figured I deserved it because I liked to hunt and fish, and I missed 43. I went in July, went to service, so I missed most of the fishing there, and I missed hunting season in that 43 month in November and December, and I missed in 44, and I missed in 45, but then I made up for it in 46. So I just, and a lot of my buddies were getting out of the service about the same time I was, and so I didn't have a girlfriend, and a couple of my buddies didn't have anybody they was seeing either. I had a couple of my classmates write to me while I was in the service, but never anything, like a girlfriend-boyfriend thing. Until I went to Maslin's, and I met my wife in there. She was working there before I was. And I was a mill clerk. I was hired to do a mill clerk work, so they hired me on like the 27th of January, and I went to go to work, and the guy I was supposed to replace, he was still working there. He was in the in the reserves. He was a major in the reserves. And see, when I got out, they didn't put me in the reserves. They never called me to go, to the reserves or, whatever, anything. So I never went. Of course, I was a PFC. But when I was down at Indian Town Gap, they wanted me to up. They would re-up. Because the guy said, you'll never go overseas or anything again. You just stay here as cadre and train the new guys coming in. But of course they didn't know about the coming wars, like they didn't know about Korea or Vietnam. So, but anyhow, my uncle was in charge of what they called the prep department. That prepared beams for the weavers to do. I was a mill clerk in the weave department, but we had a little office set between the prep department and the weave department, and they just put cardboard up. They made an office out of the middle of it. And my uncle, he was in charge of the prep department. And he said about from here you away from where I was as a mill clerk. But when they first hired me, this guy who was major, his name was Fry, he was still there. He's still working his like 2 weeks notice. So they hired me a week ahead of time. So now I don't have a job for a week until he works his time. Then they called him up to reserve. Korea, I don't know whatever happened to the man, but he was a major. So, okay, my uncle said, well, I could probably use him for a week till that guy leaves. So then I didn't have an office, or I didn't have a desk, or I didn't have anything. So I'm doing some paperwork, for him, just miscellaneous stuff. And here's my uncle that I was named after. His name was Lester Smith. That was my mother's brother. And my name is Patrick Lester Murphy. I was named after him. Okay? So I'm doing this paperwork at a little place where I read off some stuff to make a desk there like. And this young lady was a beamer. She made beams for the weave shed.
So when you say beams for the weave shed, what is that?
It was stuff they put on a big beam. She had like a machine that done all these beams, and they run stuff off of spools, yarn. And run onto this beam. And after they got like so much weight on that beam, full, looked like a spool rope. It was, big. Why, then that beam was made. Okay, but there was always an extra spool or two from that, that they're, what they call by numbers, what it was named by, by like, it was a three-quarter loom beam they made for a loom. Why, then she kept these spools by number and by name, and kept them and tied them up in a bundle. Okay, so now here I'm sitting down here in the prep department, fooling around with something, not paying any attention with anybody else around, and this young lady comes down with these extra cones, and she had a place to store them for this beam she just made. Okay, well, this young lady happened to be end up my wife later on. So I'm sitting here, and she had to ask me twice, pardon me, can I get in behind you? There was no place to walk back there until I moved. So I moved and left her back there, and I thought, oh, there's a nice looking young lady. Okay, now she worked for my uncle. So I didn't have the nerve to talk to her. So I bugged my uncle. This girl, who is she? Does she have a boyfriend? Is she engaged? Where does she live? What's her phone number? So my uncle gave me all this stuff because she worked for him.
Yeah.
Okay. So now she worked like one shift. I worked 7 to 3 one week and 3 to 11 the next week as a mill clerk. They had a special guy that worked the third shift, and I never worked third shift then. So every other week I alternated first and second shift. She worked daylight all the time, so I ask him all this stuff, and I have it all wrote down, and I come home, and of course we didn't have electricity at home yet. We didn't have a telephone when I was living at home. Lived out in Gutchow Road out here. And so I walked into Bowling Springs at the hotel, and I asked the bartender there, I said, can I make a local call? Carl. Oh, yeah. So I got this phone number out, and my uncle gave me, and I called this number. Well, her landlady, where she rented, North Hanover Street, answered the phone, so she said, just a minute. So the next thing I got this girl. And I talked to her, and I said, you probably don't know me, but I said, I'm the guy that was in your road down there. You hadn't made me move, and all this and that. And she was aware of who I was. And I asked her for a date. I said, how about Friday night? Can we go to a movie, have something to eat or something like that? She said, oh, I can't. I said, why not? She said, I'm going out with a couple of my girlfriends that we have the night out. Well, that sounded okay. Not a guy. But then she said, maybe next time. So that opened the door. So then that started, after that we started dating, and in 47, Christmas Day, I gave her a ring, engagement ring. Then in Christmas 1948, we got married. And then in 1950, it was 1949, we had our first son. Well, he wasn't born right. He had a pigeon chest. I don't know if you ever heard that or not. His chest was like sort of like that. Instead of, well, my wife wanted to name him after me, Junior. I didn't want to, but she did. And so he lived to be a year and 10 days old. He was born on the 5th of November, 1949. 49, and he passed away on the 15th of November, 1950. See, they couldn't do anything like operate on him and put spring in there like it would let. What happened was these organs were growing, but there was no place for it to go to because this pigeon chest was confining everything in there.
Mm.
So the doctor, when we looked at him when he was born, we said there's something the matter with that little boy. He said, "Oh, he got a pigeon chest." He said, he'll go that. I knew a guy did grow up with a pigeon chest. He was a drinking buddy of my dad's. And he'd go into a bar and he would challenge the guys in there and say, "You can hit me on there." Said, "I bet you'll hurt your fist before you hurt me. I bet you $1 you can't hurt me." The guy'd say, "Okay, here's $1. $1 back then, you know." So they'd punch him on the chest here with their fist and hurt their fist. So I knew you could grow up with a pigeon chest, but in my son's case it didn't happen.
Mm.
I had him down at Harrisburg Hospital for a couple of weeks, and he was just, actually they say he died of pneumonia, but I think he just suffocated. Anyhow, I'd got when he first was born, I took out a savings account for him right away, put $100 away, and I was going to add that till he growed up, go to college maybe if he wanted to or whatever. And so, and he was getting to where when I'd come home from work, he knew me, been a year old. I'd come in and he'd sit in the high chair and he'd doing the nervous, I'd go and pick him up, and that really hurt me. I mean, losing that first little boy. But then the doctor said, "Well, if you want more family," said, "Dad, you and your wife ought to try again." Of course, when they took my wife in and he was gonna have a child normal, why, the nurse, then they couldn't force a birth onto her. They had to wait for the doctor to get there. So they restrained her from going through the labor pains. And then when the doctor come in, now she don't have labor pains anymore. So he says, "Well, that's cesarean." Okay. So he was born on the 5th of November 1950, 49, died in 50. And my second son then, Bud, the one that just called here, he was going to be born the same day, 2 years later, 51. My wife said no. Well, the doctor says, "Well, we can wait some more." So then Bud, he was born on the 6th of November 1951. And then 3 years later, we had another son that came, Brad, he lives over in Prairie County. He was born. And then the doctor says, "That's it. 3 is enough." He tied her tubes in when he operated on her 3rd time. But they just cut her down through her belly. Twice on one side of her navel and one time on the other side. So we had 3 boys and raised 2. And it all started with me getting in a road. So then I was next to the oldest. I had a sister who was 15 months older than me. And she, ever since we were kids, she tried to dominate me. She tried to bully me all my life, at least until I got to be an adult. And it got to be, when she started getting sick, she smoked cigarettes, and she married a career Army man. And
Is that Dempsey Myers?
yeah, he was 82nd Airborne, World War II in Korea. Then he got out before Vietnam. So he was 82nd Airborne, World War II in Korea. Then he got out before Vietnam. So then he got out before Vietnam. But anyhow, so, yeah, I love the guy. I mean, he almost got killed in Korea, but he got through World War II okay. And he was raised by his grandmother. So he had a, rough growing up. He used to we went to one-room school, Mount Pleasant, and he'd go to school in his bare feet. And he loved my sister, even then, before she married a good-for-nothing guy. Had 3 kids to him, a divorce, and then she married Demps. We called him Dempsey, because he remembered Dempsey, the boxer.
Mm-hmm.
But he'd take all kind of crap off of my sister, but he wouldn't take anything off of me, and he'd just soon punch a guy and look at him. But then he had 3 kids to help raise. And her and I had to argue. I'm the only one she'd talk to. She wouldn't talk to my 2 sisters. Because when he got out of the service, he went down to White Hill and worked down there with the boys. He was in the print shop, and he had all these kids that was going bad, working for him. Of course, he was the top sergeant, and he knew how to handle them. So, and he'd come home from work, and Jane, my sister Jane, would tell him that Mike had two girls and a boy to her first husband, and he helped, and he raised them. Took them over in Germany when he was over there and everything. Demps did. Anyhow, she'd tell him, Mike did this and Mike did that, I want you to correct him. And that's wrong, because here it happened maybe 4 or 5 hours ago. And Dempson, he'd go out there and correct Mike, and Mike would sass him back, and Demps would punch him. But he never punched me. Then I'd get in an argument with my sister when they going to do the house up for sale. My mom passed away. She's 91. And I had everybody out there going through everything, and said, you're going to have a public sale. And a couple of my sisters said, well, I'd like this piece of jewelry of my mom's. I said, okay, I'll bid for it. I'll bid, on it for you. And I told the auctioneer, I want number 1 in the, bidding. So I got a couple of things from my one sister, but not for Jane. But we had an old clock out there Mother had, and my sister Jane wanted it, and my sister Fern wanted it, my younger sister. She's next to the baby, and I was next to the oldest. But anyhow, so here Demps and Ralph, my sister Fern's husband, he passed away a couple of years ago, but they were standing out there side by side. They got along okay. They were both bidding on this clock. They both wanted it because their wife said, I want that. I think Fern got it, not Jane. But anyhow, but we were out there, and I come in town one day and got something to eat and a cup of coffee or 2 soda or something, and I was only gone like half hour, and getting something so they could, work out there, cleaning up stuff. And my sister Faye, she said, boy, you should have been here. She said, I thought Fern and Jane was going to go together, going to fight. And from then on, Jane wouldn't talk to Faye or Fern. But they were bringing up stuff. They're bringing up stuff about Mike, her son, which she wants them to correct him, but she don't want anybody else to know he's a bad boy, stealing, picking up stuff, But she didn't believe that he did that kind of stuff, but he did. When my mother went to Florida, one time he broke in her house and stole some stuff out of the house. Then he come around later years to all the family and apologized for what he did. But he never improved. His dad was that way. My sister Jane's first husband, the one she had the 3 children to. But Demps was supposed to correct Mike. So Mike would start mouthing off to him and Demps would punch him. So Jane would say to me, when we were arguing, I'd make her talk to me. All growing up, and even when we were adults, she's the only one that would talk to me. She got on, we were arguing one day, and I was getting the best of her, and she got out in the car. She went out to get in the car, and she said, "I'll go down. I'm going down home." She just lived down the street, just right down, Gutchall Road, a little farther than where my mom lived. And so I run out and ripped the car door open before she could get started. I said, if things get any worse than what they are, I said, there's only be one key. The realtor's going to have the key. Nobody else is going to have a key to get in the house, because everybody had a key before that. Things were getting messing. Nobody admit to taking anything. I didn't take anything, but, I don't know about the rest of the family. But my brother Terry, he didn't show up too much. Brother Tim, he's growing up. My mother always wanted a child to look like her. Well, Tim was the only one, the baby. He had red hair and my mom had red hair. But then he turned out bad. He turned out more like his dad. And he died young. He was only 60 years old when he died. A heart attack. But he drank and smoked and done uppers and downers and, getting in fights at the bars, like my dad did when he was drinking. And my dad used to box in the Army, when he was in the Army in World War I. But when he'd get drinking, he'd argue with anybody, and most of the time he'd get punched out. He wasn't a very big guy. He's only 5'5". And so, but he always got the worst of it. My dad would, when he'd abused my mother. He didn't punch her or anything, but he just called her every name under the sun bad. And when I started growing up, I thought, I'm not going to be like my dad. When I got to be 14 or 15 years old, I used to stand up to my dad. I never hit my dad, but I always stood up to him. He'd get through drinking. He'd always be able to find his way home. The only good thing, he never tried to drive. Never drove a car. So that's good. He'd walk into Morning Springs. They barred him down here at the hotel because he's arguing with people all the time and stuff. I backtracked him one night. He fell in the door at home with no coat on and no hat on, no gloves. But he seems to be able to find his way home. He just fell in the door and snow all over him. We drug him out and put him up to bed. My brother Terry, he's 2 years younger than me. And we go out and take him upstairs and put him in bed. 5 minutes later, he's down in his underwear wanting to fight somebody. And I'd grab him and chuck him up against the wall and I'd say, "You old goat." But I never hit my dad. He tried to hit me, but But anyhow, so then when I got only one key, then stuff wasn't missing anymore. But anyhow, my sister Jane, she wouldn't get away. She'd just bite me. And I told my mom, I said, "She's biting me." She said, "Well, bite her back." I had bad teeth growing up, and not such a thing as having your teeth fixed or this or that, 6 of us. Anyhow, so I started slapping her the back and she'd bite me. Because she couldn't get her way, she'd just bite me. Because like I said, her and I mouth fought, and she'd say, "I'll go down and get Demps, he'll straighten you out." Her husband, the guy would punch everybody except her. I never had a problem with Demps. I made up my mind right away I wasn't going to fight him. He'd have beat me anyhow. Because when he was in the Army, he got busted from a sergeant, cleared down to private a couple times for punching officers. They come to the barracks one night. They had the unlisted men were having a party and getting a little loud, and a second lieutenant came up to the door and he said, "You're making a lot of racket here." He said, "You have to cut it down," and he just punched him. Private, first class. 6 months later, he's back up to sergeant. I wasn't going to fight him. I never had any problems with the guy. He never told me anything that he said, "Your sister's saying this or that, and I don't agree with that, or I could take up for her," or never said anything about any of the problems I had with her. And he's a good guy. I love the guy, because he went through a lot more than I did in World War II in Korea. And first car I bought off of him. He's going down to Fort Meade. I just got down there when I wasn't going other places. I was like, I don't know how many different stations he might have had. I had a nephew that was a career Army man too, and I went out to see him at Fort Riley, Kansas, and then he ended up at Fort Lewis, Washington. I went out there to visit him. I didn't drive. I drove to Kansas, my wife and I, but I flew then out to Washington. He was out there, and that's where he got out of the service then with. He got out at Fort Lewis. Then he married a German girl when he was over there, my nephew. I had him as my nephew. He's my wife's brother's boy, and he was one of the oldest, and they lived over in Prairie County, and they weren't going any place. They were all a bunch of kids and not having this and that, ragged looking, and poor family. And even being the oldest, he said he's got to do something about that. So he enlisted the service. And he made a career out of it. I lived in Kalispell, Montana. But he married this German girl. And they found out after they got married she couldn't have children. So they adopted a little German girl when she's just a couple days old, and raised her, and to this day, I don't think they told her she's adopted yet. And that's wrong. Now she's a grandmother herself, the daughter is. And when he was in Vietnam, my nephew, he used to come over and visit us when he on leave and stuff like that. And she stayed here for a year while he was in Vietnam, her and the little girl. And he's just waiting for my wife to say, "Can Linda and Tammy stay here while I'm over there?" My wife said that one. They said, "Oh, can they really?" Yeah, he was just waiting for her to tell him that. So they stayed here with us for a whole year. And this Linda, I mean, she's a German girl. She just butchered up the English terrible, but she wasn't backward about it. She'd just talk out to people and get loud, and mixed up English and German, but she was a lovely girl. But she used to do her groceries at the commissary, Carlisle, and I'd go in there with her, but I couldn't buy them. I wasn't Purple Heart or prisoner of war or any disability at all. I couldn't get a card I wasn't retired. And she'd buy groceries and I'd haul them out here. She'd buy them for us too. But she stayed here for a whole year. Well, anyhow, I was still working in Maslin's. And then getting to the point where it was getting tough for me because they're starting to use a computer and they were going from floor covering to automotive. And here I am, 57 years old, and I'm going to learn how to use the computer. I don't think so. Girl standing beside me, clerk, she's going like this, like a typewriter, and I'm like this, you know. So what they did was took me off as a scheduler on automotive when I was a scheduler for floor covering, and they had a plant down in Atmore, Alabama. And they wanted to send me down there. I said my roots were here. So I wouldn't go down now. I got 30-some years with the company, so they had to take care of me. So they try to make me a schedule in the automats. Now they got the computer working. And this girl out-types me by all kind of, rhythm. So they end up taking me off as a scheduler and putting her on, and then be the clerk. Well, that happened to be 1980. Well, 1980, Masson's went on strike, right? So then they got us office guys over the plant screwing up things more than you were making it right. And all these people that worked in them jobs over in the mill was out walking the picket. They didn't try to keep us from going in the plant. The people, I had a lot of friends out there, They had asked me, how you doing in there, Murph? Terrible. Screwing up or we'll make it right. I told them the truth. Okay. So they had a guy, his name was Rodney Throne. He just died here a year ago. He worked at Maslin's. He was a scheduler. He left Maslin's. He's gone for a year. He come crawling back and asked for a job again from Maslin's. I told him, I said, I'd never do that. Crawl back for a second chance. He finally quit the second time and went down to Navy Depot and retired from down there. But anyhow, him and I were good buddies, but you know how you dicker back and forth, like you're tearing each other apart, but you're actually really good friends. I have friends like that up at the vets. I go up there. Joe Sugars, he sits right next to me and eats on Friday night. He's tearing me up all the time. And his wife sits right across the table, and she says, I don't know, Pat, I don't know why you put up with that, what Joe says. I said, you know why he does that? He likes me. And that's why I always figured about people, when they tear you up. We played softball, Rodney Throne and I, and then we're in the different teams, and we was always arguing back and forth and stuff like that, but, I considered him a friend. So anyhow, we went over on this one machine in 1980 when they were on strike, and I was helping him on this machine. I had a cutter that was cutting the carpet. It had a space in between. I was cutting in between the automotive, and it was on a big wheel. And come break time, and I said, Rodney, I said, I'm going over to the office. What do you know? I said, I might not be back. I went over to the office and talked to the guy in the office, and I thought, my boss, he said, we don't know how much work we lost by going on strike, but he said, I can't do anything about moving you until we off strike. I said, well, I can't wait that long because, I was coming home and I was taking out my family, things weren't going right in there, and it was wrong because I'd most lovely wife you would want to have, and I never abused her, but I talked pretty nasty to her maybe sometimes, and my kids, and now here Tammy and Linda's living with us now, and Linda, she's fighting with my boys. They're growing up, Bud and Brad, and she punches them and carries on like a man, Linda was, not the girl. She wasn't that old. Tammy wasn't that old yet. She was probably 8 or 9 years old, something like that. But anyhow, so I told Rodney, I said, I might not be back. Well, I went over there, and Nelson Paxton, he was in the payroll department, and I told him, he knew me, he used to live up here in Springville Road, and I told him, I said, get my resignation things ready, I said, I'm quitting. Oh, 33 years, you can't be quitting bad. He said, you know, you got a lot of time here. I said, make out how much money I have in the profit sharing plan, how much vacation I have. I said, now, are you going to pay me by the rate as a scheduler or as a clerk when they took me off at scheduling? Oh, he said, well, you had most of your years, he said, was as a scheduler. He said, we'll give you the higher rate of pay, which gave me a break there, you know. So I sat in there and talked to the personnel manager, and he told me, he said, they'd only hired him about 5 years before, Madeline. He said, I can't do anything. He says, who knows? He said, I might be next to go. And I found out by the grapevine that he was. They fired him. But anyhow, I never went back to the plant after I quit in there. I never went back. I saw a lot of people that I knew from working in there, but not at the plant. I never went back. And then it burnt down, you know. I didn't think it would ever burn down because most of the buildings were made out of metal. But it did. My sister always said, she said, I can't believe you wouldn't be interested in going in there and see how that looks in there from being burned down. I said, I didn't have too many good relationships, and my first 10 years was okay as a mill clerk. That was okay. But then after that, it started moving me around. And
Well, what did your position as a mail clerk involve?
well, I was drafted.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to this one-room school, and I told you about walking home, did I?
Yep.
Okay, well, that's when I should have been in first grade. But I didn't go until the next year. Now I'm 8 years old in first grade. I didn't fail in school, but I just was a little late.
Yeah, you didn't want to go.
I was 19 whenever I graduated.
Yeah.
But I had to walk into Bowling Springs. Cumberland Valley wasn't built yet. And I had to actually come in here without paying any tuition, even though I was in Monroe Township. But anyhow, so, you know, 4 years walking in here, that was pretty good. I mean, about a mile and a half, but when the weather was bad, my mother said to me, she said, you're going to go to school, you're going to graduate. Because my sister Jane didn't graduate. My sister Fern didn't graduate, the one still living. She's my younger, next to the baby. My sister Faye didn't graduate, she only went to 8th grade. And my brother Terry went to the Navy. He enlisted when he was 17, I was 19. And he was a junior in high school. And so he come back from his service in the Navy. He was over in the Pacific. Well, he went with the graduating class for about 6 months, and then he got a GED. So he graduated. And then my brother Tim, Cumberland Valley now was built when he was getting into school. So he went to Cumberland Valley, and he graduated from there. So Tim and Terry and I was the only three of the boys graduated from high school. But I was the first one, and my mom said, you're going to graduate. Even though I was the oldest, and I worked for the farmers there in the summertime, and, make a little bit of money that way and stuff. But every time I'd come in to get groceries in Bowling Springs, the local kids would fight with me.
Mm-hmm.
And then my dad, he said, I know, he said, them town kids pick on you, but he said, if I ever hear you were in a fight with one of them, he said, and you got whipped, he said, you get home, you're going to get whipped again. So I thought, I wasn't very big. I only weighed 130 pounds when I went to service. And I thought, I'm not going to get whipped twice. So I'd stand up to these kids here in town. And there's only one guy I almost had a fight with and probably would have whipped the heck out of me because he's a big guy, Roy Lutz. And he went to the Marines. He's a big guy, and then he got home from the service, and he went to Dickinson College on the college, and he played tackle, and they didn't have football in Bowling Springs then. That was in 44, 45, and 46. I think he started football in 46 up here. So Paul Paxton, he was a good football or good baseball player and a good basketball player, and he wasn't very big, but he could dribble and move the ball around. And he went to the Navy, and he when he come home, he went to Texas College and played quarterback, and then he played high school football. Roy Lutz, he never played football, and he was a guard on Dickinson College team. Well, Dickinson was never noted for having winners, but anyhow, I almost got in a fight with Roy Lutz. But that was one of them things, like my dad said, you get a whip till you get home, you get another whipping. That coming in through the park over there, and they just mowed the grass. And these local kids was throwing big chunks of grass at each other. They didn't break it up or nothing. And I happened to walk by pull my expressway wagon, because I used to get like 5 gallons of kerosene. We called it kerosene lights, put it out at home. And I kept walking by there, and one of these bunches of grass hit me. I don't know who threw them, and Roy Lutz, he happened to be standing pretty close to me. So I just went right over and got right up in his face. So what do you think you're doing, and all this and that, right? So, of course, he was big. I mean, he played tackle and football and went to the Marines. And this was after that, so, So anyhow, there used to be a park, they had seesaws and stuff down in the park. Well, there was a guy by the name of Pug Minnick, they called him. He'd just gone with his wife then. They weren't married yet. And they were sitting over in one of these here seesaws. And we're standing over there talking to each other, Roy Lutz and I, and Pug Minnick, he come walking over. And he said to Roy, he said, "Why don't you pick on somebody your son's size?" Right? So Roy, he walked away. And I walked away and done my thing to go to the store. Then I come into Bowling Springs, and Roy Lutz, he's in my same class. This big guy. He never tried to pick on me or anything in school. And I didn't get two weapons that day. But anyhow, so that's one of the stories. But I was a little whippersnapper. I used to, when we lived in Churchtown, before I went to school, my sister went down there to first grade. And I used to walk down and walk home with her. The sister I was fighting with all the time, Jane. But anyhow, we grew up. So then I would I was in senior year in school up in here. I was 19 years old. And they changed the draft age from 21 to 18. So that they got me in the draft age. So then I was drafted. But I probably would have went anyhow. You had a choice. It's finishing school if you were a senior, or going to service right away. Well, a lot of the guys went right away. But I said, I may as well just finish school. So then I graduated in June the 2nd and went to the Army in July the 2nd. So I had a month. Great. But a lot of my buddies that I palled around with, why, they enlisted. They were all gone. Kenny Snyder, Paul Shambaugh, his son lives up here where I had the fire. Ron Shambo, that's why. And Ron Shambo was in one of my oldest son's class, school, up here. Vinnie Brenneman. Had a couple buddies, fishing buddies, hunting buddies. We didn't have any girlfriends. We'd just all get together. And I used to, like I say, I got a few letters when I was in the service room. Some of my girl classmates, but nobody was serious. So until Jenny came along up there, I showed you a wedding picture, didn't I?
Yep.
Yep. So things are on pretty good. The good Lord so's watching over me. But like I say, when I was in the service, right before the Battle of the Bulge, I showed you that picture where I was on, and we wrecked that house by shooting over it. We were supporting 28th Division. I told you that, I believe.
Yep.
They're the Pennsylvania Division, right? Bloody Bucket.
Okay.
Okay. Well, when they lost quite a few guys at D-Day, and we were supporting them. And whenever the Germans were building up for the Battle of the Bulge, they told us, they said it was a surprise, but it wasn't a surprise. They kept telling us the Germans were up to something. We used to go up, they were like 5 miles up ahead of us. But sometimes a couple guys in my outfit was from Pennsylvania. And I thought, well, I'll just go up there one day and talk to them guys. Maybe I can find somebody I know. They were all replacements. I couldn't find anybody who was ever even residing in Pennsylvania. They're all draftees because they lost a lot of guys on D-Day. So I landed in France in August of 1944, 2 months after D-Day. So, and they moved us, they told us, destroy the gun, and then you're on your own if they overrun you, Germans. So I decided that I was going to try to get away if I could. Never happened because they moved us just about a week before D-Day, or Battle of the Bulge. Moved us up to this little town in Rot, R-O-T-T. And then we fired night and day during the Battle of the Bulge, and the whole time over Christmas of '44. But anyhow, so that saved us there. And then I found out, somebody said we lost more guys, lost more casualties in the Battle of the Bulge than we did in D-Day. And that's hard to believe, knowing how many they lost on the beaches, you know.
Yeah.
But I realized what was going on. The Germans were on the offense. They weren't taking prisoners. They were just shooting our guys when they'd overrun us. If we'd give up, they'd just shoot them. And that was wrong. Because when we were there at Rot, we'd see truck after truckload coming back with the frozen, you'd see arms and legs sticking up in the back of the truck, you know, that was bad. Because it was, a lot of snow that doing it. And they had cloud coverage because that's what the Germans planned it that way. So our Air Force couldn't end on the action. And we stayed there going to the Battle of the Bulge, shooting night and day. And that's like I say, that one guy, his name is not Mitchell, but
Walter
what was
Green.
his name?
Walter Green.
He's on that picture.
Green. From Kentucky.
I can't think his name. But he's a big farm boy. The guy said, "Do you have a nice little hand, Murph?"
Yeah.
He was a big farm boy. The shell, we'd put the shell on this shell cart, and it had 4 handles on it. It was picked for 4 guys to carry the shell up to the gun, right? Well, this guy, he could do it. I mean, he's a big farm boy. And guess who was on the other side picking up the other side of the shell? Me. 140 pounder. 360-pound shell and the tray weighed 40 pounds. That's 400 pounds. So I was picking up 200 pounds, at least from the waist, when we had a reduced, of guys, because we cut 16 guys in our crew, so 8 of us would take one night, day and night, and the next night the other half crew would be on a night shift shooting the Battle of the Bulge, so you had to double up duties. And then I was number 7, I pulled the trigger. So I could pick up 200 pounds up to my waist and carry it maybe the length of this room from where they stored the projectiles up to where the loading tray, it goes up to the barrel of the gun. And they'd push your shell off the loading tray onto this loading ramp. And then the old guys would throw that tray outside, and then all the other guys would get on and say, "Ready, ram!" And you'd ram that shell up in the barrel of the gun, and the landing grooves, they had a rotating band on the shell with copper. So you'd push this shell up in the landing grooves into the barrel, and then it wouldn't slide back down. And then you could put the powder in behind that, then shut the breech block, and hook the fuse, put the fuse in the end. It was a fuse quick or fuse delayed or however you wanted to. Screw that in before you put the shell in the barrel. And then powder right behind it, 88 pounds of powder. Shut the breech block and screw the fuse in, or I think in that box I had all these pictures in. Was an ammunition box, French ammunition box, and then Jeremy, he put it in that box. He separated stuff, I guess, went over there. But he got all that. And then he said, "Don't you have a picture with your outfit on?" I said, "Yeah, it's upstairs." So I went up this morning and brought it down. I wanted to show you that. I had that hanging up in my room. My trophy room, where I got all my deer horns stuff I got up there. In my gun cabinet with my guns in. Of course, I have in my will, I want my grandson to get my guns. He's a hunter. Him and my son Bud both got a buck last year in buck season. I didn't. I was out with him a couple of days, but I didn't get any shooting. Yeah, I didn't quit without a job when I quit Maslin's in there.
Yeah.
Whenever I told Rodney Throne that I might not be back, and I wasn't, I didn't go back. I went up there and filled out an application. The guy said, "You want to go to work tomorrow?" "No, that was Friday." I said, "I'm not going. How about Monday?" "Okay. Okay. Come in Monday." I went in Monday. They couldn't find my application or filled out for a job up at Holly Milk. And the boss said, "I don't know what I've done with that," he said, "but can you sit down and fill out another one?" I said, "Well, I can't fill it out like I filled out the first one." I said, "I had records in front of me then, different jobs I had at Maslin's over the course of 33 years. I said, "I can't tell you." She said, "Just put down what you can remember." And I said, "Well, I'm supposed to go to work at 4 o'clock in the afternoon." "That's okay." He says, "I'll take care of your time card." Then they threw me to the wolves up there. They put me in the bagging room. You in there and you come out, you look like a snowman from bagging that powder. Oh. But I stuck it out. But I had to profess like a lot of people have said, I done a lot of praying. I asked the good Lord to give me strength, to give me enough of years that I can retire from here. I don't want to have to bail out like some of these 21-year-old guys do. And so many people up there. I'd get all kind of part-timers up there to work for me. 1-2 days. I don't have to do this kind of work. Young guys. Then I had a guy, his daddy used to live right across the street here from me. He's a big boy, Bogroski. Eddie Bogroski, he still works over there at Holy Milk. I got him in my crew. Well, he figured I'd go easy on him because I'm his neighbor, right? But I didn't show any partiality there. A lot of guys don't like certain jobs in the assembly line there, and you had to be careful who you put on the job, because if you had a part-timer there and it was a dangerous situation, you don't want to put him there. When they seal the bags, they go to a sealer. 6 months after I retired from up there, they had a part-timer, and he got caught in that sealer, and he died. Mm. They should never put him on that job. But I wasn't there then. I'd retired.
So what was your job at Holly Milk?
Well,
so when you first started, you were in the room with, was it condensed milk, basically, or
they had these big, you saw the big silos up there. Mm-hmm. All right, well, they have milk in them. Then they go through a drying system that separates the water from the powder, and separate that, and then the powder goes into certain big places. And anyhow, then you take, in the bag room, you pull that powder into bags, and we did a lot of stuff for government. They shipped the stuff overseas, powdered milk, mm-hmm. and some of it was local. When they had Leo's, remember Leo's out at the Holly Pike? Mm-hmm. They used to sell groceries and everything out there. They used to make their ice cream, and they got powdered milk from Holly, okay. Holly milk, and then out to Land O'Lakes. Now they make mostly butter. But anyhow, you bag this like 50-pound bags, and when you did the whole milk, it was 100-pound bags. You put them in bags, and they go through this sealer. And that's where that guy got tight. You have to hold that bag until it goes into that heat. I mean, to make sure it's even. Because if a bag gets that way, that don't pass. You have to have that nice even seal. It's got like glue on the flap. You flip it over, run it through this heat, and then it comes out, it's sealed. And then it goes out through, and they put it on skids. And you make this, the 50-pounders, you rank them eight rows high. Five bags to a row, up 8 rows high. And then you come in there with the lift truck and take that out in the warehouse and store it, and come in and do this over again, over and over again. So he put me on there as a regular crew, just like a new person. I'm 57 years old. And I do every job that they put me on, especially out loading skids. On the skid, you're loading the bags on the skid. 8 rows high is pretty high for me to reach with a 50-pound bag. Set that up there, 5 rows. And I had a guy, he was just a 21-year-old guy. He prided himself on building skid loads, nice straight. Because if you didn't rack them straight, you take a lift truck and take them out in the warehouse, they fall off. You have to build them, make it nice and square, straight up and down. None, Well, I got Eddie over here one day. He's a tall guy, so I figured, he can do some building. He didn't want to do that job that day. So I put him out there, and here comes the bags out to him. He just throws them on the skid. I didn't let him go too far because I'm going to have to stop him now, and I'm going to have to build that right. So he only gets a couple bags on the skid, and they're not on the right. So I said, told the guys on the conveyor belts, I said, wait, hold it just a minute. I went out and I talked to him. I said, Eddie, I said, I know you can build skids. You can build them on that skid like better than what you're doing. I said, now, if you don't start ranking them like you're supposed to do, I said, guess who's going to rebuild that load? I said, you're going to be right out here in front of everybody, and I said, you're going to rebuild that load. Well, they don't want you to do that because they want the production out. They don't want you stalling because of this or that. They want you to run nice and easy. Okay? So I walked away from him and kept looking at him out of the side of my eye. After a while, I see him straighten up bags on the skid. Now it's getting 4 or 5 rows high, and it looked pretty good. I go out and I said, okay, Eddie. I said, yeah, I know you can do it. So he's okay now. He's just bullheaded. But he thought I wouldn't do that because, I'm his neighbor. And his mother was a good friend of my wife's. They were back and forth all the time. And half the time, Eddie wanted to do something over when he started getting big. Turned out he was over 6 foot. But anyhow, he's running over here looking, asking his mother this and that. So he's over here a lot too, but not because my boys are around, because he's a lot younger than my boys. Anyhow, but he was in and out across the street, and his dad usually played guitar in a band. I forget what the name of them were, but Dad was real good on the guitar. Of course, he died of cancer. He works at Sentinel. Anyhow, but they put me in the crew, and whatever job they put me on, I done.
Now, so when they first put you on the crew, though, you weren't in charge of it.
But what happened was, the guy that was the crew leader. Mm-hmm. They were starting to make butter then. He wanted to go in the butter room. Davy Nelson. I knew him from working at Maslin's. When he quit Maslin's, went out to Holy Milk. A couple guys left Maslin's, went out to Holy Milk. I found out after I went out there. But anyhow, so he was the chief. So now one day he says to me, he says, Murph, they always call me, didn't call me Pat, he called me Murph. Hey Murph, Davy said to me, he said, you're supposed to go out in the warehouse and learn how to run that lift truck. I never had any idea of how to run a lift truck. They had electric ones in the building. They had one that took regular gas, like, or whatever, for outside. They don't like fumes inside. So they had electric lift trucks inside. So he said, go out there, and he said, there's a bunch of empty skids out there. He said, pile them up on top of each other, nice and straight, tear them back down and do it again, run up and down the aisle, forward, backwards. Said, just keep the levers working and lifting, this and that. So I did that for probably an hour, and then I come back in and I said, I think I got it down pretty good. Okay. So that they were prepping me to be the crew leader. Mm-hmm. See? So then he went over to the butter room, and then they made me crew leader. Okay. Well, being I was a new man, I had to work the night shift. Right? Even though I was 57 years old. So they had 3 shifts. So I get the 3rd shift. Now it was in 1980 when I left Maslin's. Right? I tried to sell this house. I bought a trailer off my niece, and I put it on a piece of ground up here off of Red Tank Road, and I moved into the trailer and I tried to sell this house. All 1980. The only good thing about 1980 was when my son Bud, and just called there a while ago, he got married. That was a good thing. But this is all out in 1980. So now I'm trying to sell this house myself. I'm not giving it a realtor, right? I had a couple of people looking at it, but all of them had to walk up steps to the bathroom. They didn't like it. They were like middle-aged people, you know. I still walk upstairs to the bathroom. I have a bathroom downstairs, but I don't like to use it for, you know, make bad odor or something. Just do number two. So I use the one upstairs. I got a handrail that takes you up the step. I go up there. But anyhow, so now they made me crew leader of the third shift. Okay? Crew leader gets more money. Right? Okay. So then I had a crew, and I hired new guys, and I had to break them in, and all kind of, and then these part-timers, you get good ones, you get bad ones, you get a guy that used to work, that works at Madison's, he worked 7 to 3 at Madison's, he come out there and worked from 4 to 12. Double dipper, you might say. He turned out, I just saw in the paper about a month ago where he died. He's burning the candle at both ends. He lived over in Prairie County. Well, he'd go to sleep going home from work, wreck his car. Because he was working, you know, he's working 16 hours, 2 jobs. So anyhow, I had him and he was slow. You could only put him on. Finally, he got his dad as a part-time worker too, and his dad was slow. They were a little slow in everything they did. They weren't really retarded, but they were just, you know. Mm-hmm. His dad, I liked his dad, but the boy was a smart ass. You know, he's always wisecracking people, and I had a part-time. Well, he was a part-timer. Had them in there one day. The way you worked was you worked 7 days. You're off 2. You work 7 more. You're off 2. Different days of the week. You work 7 more, third time, and then you're off 3. So you get a weekend off. Every 3 weeks you get a weekend off. Okay? Okay, so when they made me crew leader, I had to have somebody stand in for me when I was off, right? So now I have to try to pick somebody that knows the way around. Well, I had one guy, he wasn't slow, but he was quiet. He didn't like to tell people what to do. He was in my crew when I got there. He was a middle-aged guy. He wasn't a young fella. I always figured he'd be good to stand in for me. But now they always want production, so they don't want you goofing off. So anyhow, this there one part-timer, not the guy that died, but the other guy said part-timer, I knew he'd done drugs. In my crew, I had a stoolie. I had a guy that reported to me everything that guy does drugs, that guy don't, that guy does this, that, yeah, you know. So I said, okay, as long as he does his job when they're here, that's all I am concerned about. I don't know what to do outside, right? But some of them gave themselves away. I knew who to watch and who didn't, but some of them had done a good job for me out there, you know. Some of them didn't. One guy, he walked out. I put him stacking, and a guy from the warehouse come in and told me, he said, you may as well shut the line down. He said, nobody out there putting their bags on a skid. He said, they're just falling all over the place. Okay, so I went to my boss then, the guy in Boston Daylight, and he didn't work too much night, but I went to him and I said, I kept a chart on who I had and who didn't have, part-timer, full-timer, you know. And I said, I put a big red X, made it real bright. I said, I don't want that guy anymore, part-timer. I said, I don't want him. Okay? Okay, say, okay. A couple weeks later, who they send out there? This guy. He comes into work. I said, wait a minute. Nobody does anything. I go to the office. If I go to the office, I talk to the guy. I said, I told you I don't want him again. I said, nobody does anything over there in the back room until he leaves. Okay. So that guy come over, the boss, he come over and said, you have to leave. Well, he didn't have a ride. Somebody dropped him off to come to work. I'm sorry, fella. You just screwed yourself out of a whatever. But I said, you done me once dirty, you're not going to do me another time dirty. Said, you don't work here, but he was one of the guys that done drugs. Because I had him out in the parking lot one day when supper time, and he was out there dealing with somebody. So I made sure I had him, the right way. But anyhow, okay. Now this other part-timer I had in there, this Bell, Gary Bell, who worked at Maslin and come out there and worked for me, they made him full-time out at Holly Milk. Full-time Maslin, full-time Holly Milk. He's not part-timer anymore. He comes over to me, he says, hey Marv, he says, want to shake my hand? I'm full-time here again. I just turned away from him. I said, holy smokes. So I went over to the boss, I said, why did you hire him full-time? He wasn't even a good part-time worker. Oh, Okay, I said, I catch him sleeping over there every now and then when things are real slow. Stands along the rail where the bag comes by and it hits him on the hands. He's awake. So I went over and I said, Barry, I said, you're sleeping. And I said to the boss that, he said, well, you can fire him. You don't have to send him to me. He said, you can fire him. So I said, Barry, I said, you're sleeping. Oh, I'm not. He said, I'm just resting my eyes. I said, well, I catch you sleeping again. I said, I can fire you. I don't have to take you over to the office. I can fire you. Well, he wouldn't talk to me for a couple of days. But now I just saw where he died not too long ago. But anyhow, they made me foreman of the third shift. Okay. Now they've done something illegal. The company. Not me. I done it illegally, but I done it because he ordered me to do it. They have some powder in there. See, I put stamps on the bags. Now these, when they get so old, they can't sell that powder anymore. So now the boss came to me and said, got a special job for you. They had taken the third shift off then. Okay. I said, what's this? She said, well, I got some powder back here that I have to change the bags on. Put them in different bags. Put them up-to-date bags. Stamps. Right? So how about if you take a crew, he said, well, hire a couple people, and you take a crew, and because you had to use that sealer, you had to use it when it wasn't being used by scheduled shifts, So now I go in third shift. All right? With these couple guys, and one of them was a black man. He was okay, but I have to teach him how you want to do this. So I'm making sure when I get the right guy to do the sealing, it'll get fast in there. So for about, I don't know, about maybe, and he told me where the powder was to be transferred. So It was like a whole, almost a whole big bunch of the. I think we were there probably 2 or 3 months, rebagging this powder. And then he took me off, and I never heard anything about it, you know. But anyhow, then what I did with these guys, one guy, he quit while we were doing the job. And then I told the boss, I said, I'm short a man. Well, he said, can you do it without him? I said, I guess so. Because we're not dropping bags out of the, you know, like you're just tearing the bags open and dumping them in another bag. And then all we had to do is seal them and put them on skids and take them back out in the warehouse. So I said, I guess I can get by with, I think I had 4 guys. So now only 3. Counting myself, I've done most of the work, you know. But anyhow, okay, so that done good, okay. So I had one guy, he still works up there, John Kalman. He married one of the girls that worked in the office up there. He's about my size. He wasn't a very big guy, but he wanted to do the job right. So when you went to work up there, they had where the hot air come out, they had a chimney come out at the top of the plant up there. If that lid was open, that means they're running a dryer, so there's powder. You got powder tonight. So we know before I even get in the plant up there, I could see if the window was or the lid was open on that chimney. So I knew it was going to have powder or not. If it was closed, iffy. So John said, next time he said that we're going to be having powder. See, there's air that gets in that powder when it comes out of that air. And you have to hesitate when you drop that bag or drop that powder in that bag. You got to hesitate a little bit while it's going down the line because you don't want to fall over, so it's still open. But you let some of that air out of that powder. And by the time it got over to where you're sealing it, you can seal it. So, we got by with that, and they took a third shift was off, and then they still kept me on as foreman of the bag room. Now I don't have a shift, right? Took third shift off. Okay. How would you like to work in the crew, Murph, on the first and second shift at the third shift rate pay, and whenever the foreman on the bag room is off his 3 days or 2 days off, you work as the crew leader in his place? Okay, I get third shift rate now, right? So now I'm working the second shift as a foreman, so I have to get to know all them guys again and know who's the goof offs and who ain't. And then when the first shift guy, he's off, the crew leader there, he was a goof off. He done nothing. Whenever I worked in the crew and he was still working there, his day on, he'd come to me and say, he knew I was as a foreman. He knew I worked as a foreman. He said, Murph, can you watch things? He said, I got diarrhea. He said, I have to go to the bathroom. He's a big guy, you know. He come back, he smelled like smoke, terrible. He'd do that 2 or 3 times in an 8-hour shift. Take an extra break. And I was doing his job. So they found him too because he was a goof off. And me, like a dummy, I loaned him $5 one night and he never paid me back. I done that a couple times with the guys up there, loaned the money. So anyhow, what I said is John Kalman, when he said, some night he said that there's, the boss had told me, he said, if you get 200,000 pounds of powder out in an 8-hour shift, he said, I'll treat you and your crew to special meal. I said, I mean, how can I say I'm going to have the same crew every day? Because here's his 3 days off. See, you know, I have different amount of guys in there. I might end up with 10 people and only have a crew of 7 people. You know. Well, he said, you figure it out. He said, if you get 200,000 pounds of powder out in an 8-hour shift, I'll buy the crew T-bone steak dinner. How you going to do that? How are we going to all go to a restaurant together? Well, he said, I'll give the money. How much is it going to cost? John Kalman, he says, when that chute's open, Murphy says, we're going to get you 200,000 pounds tonight. It's the first time they ever did it. And we did it. I was in the crew leader. And we had guys that really forced themselves. And what happened was, at the end of my shift, I even had like maybe 10 bags on another skid for the guy that relieved me. Extra. He's got a skid there already sorted. I gave him 10 bags there. And one guy was retired military. Ralph Ronan, you know Ronan's Carlisle here, the Undertaker. His uncle. My youngest son worked with him at Tire and Rubber. Now he comes out there, and they had him on the 3rd shift. When they took the 3rd shift off, they put him in the crew. He didn't like that, right? But he must have been a sergeant or something because he acted like somebody. And he bullied around with the guys, and he wasn't very popular with the guys in his crew. I'd go there, like when I worked 2nd shift and he was working the 3rd shift, he'd come in a little early and I'd say, hey Ralph Ronan was his name. I said, back here's where we'll take his powder and here's what we do. And he'd just stand around and he'd say, I'll figure it out, he said. I'll figure it out. So then whenever they took him off as a crew leader, they put him in the crew, I got him sometimes as in the crew, you see. And he sort of tried to, he'd say, how about if I drop powder this time after lunch? How about if I seal? How about if I build the loads? I said, wait a minute, Rolf. I said, we'll figure that out when the time comes. He's trying to, show his authority. But anyhow, well, that one time he rode his motorcycle to work, so he pulled inside the building out there. Okay, and I heard the guys talking. Then my stoolie came and told me, hey, tonight, guy's gonna gang Rolf. They're gonna beat him up. I went to Rolf and I told him, I said, Rolf, I said, when you clock out tonight, I said, how about getting on your cycle and getting the hell out of here? Why? I said, just do as I tell you, will you? Okay. I didn't tell him they're going to beat him up. Then the guy said, where did Ralph get to? Where did Ralph get to? It worked out. Like I say, I asked the good Lord for help, and he gave it to me.
How long did you end up staying at Holly Milk? You said you started in 1980?
And quit in 1986.
Okay.
I guess I screwed this up, but you worked holidays, you got extra double time. So I worked till the 2nd of January in 86. Right? So I needed double time and working New Year's. okay? But then I had to pay $10 extra to the, what is that you have to do? You pay $10 for, on your job. I forget what it was, some, you have to pay it into something, I mean.
Oh, the, like, local tax or something?
Yeah, something. So I had to pay that $10 extra for 2 days. But I still made out okay, you know. But what happened to me then is after I was in the bag room for forever, I had one guy out there, what was his name? John Voco or something. He lived down here at Allenbury, across from Allenbury. Anyhow, he was in maintenance. He was boss of maintenance. And he looked like little Hitler. He had a little black mustache, combed his hair, you know, like Hitler did. And they wouldn't call him out to his face, but everybody called him Hitler. Nobody liked him. Well, I didn't like him either. But anyhow, every time I'd see him, and he'd always some kind of smart-ass remark, you know, something. So we was up in break time one time, and we didn't clean ourselves up really until the end of the shift. We were up there eating lunch, and he comes walking in there, you know, he's just a little guy. Anyhow, and he looks at me and says, "Well, it looks like somebody's doing some work." I said, "How the hell would you know it?" I said, "You don't do nothing." He walked away. He didn't know what to say. So anyhow, so the boss up there, and I told him, I said, John and I don't see eye to eye. But anyhow, the treatment plant, out with it, so the water goes down the creek, okay? Finally, they take me out of the bag room. There was a guy who was in charge out there, but he was by himself. His name was, I forget what his name is. He's a young guy, and he's really husky. But anyhow, he was out in the treatment plant, right? I knew him from, you know, his family lived down here. His dad was married to the the guy used to have the zoo out here.
Kirchhoff.
Right. I can't never think. He's married to Craig. John Kirchhoff is married to this boy's dad. So his brother. What's his name? Rusty Grove. Rusty Grove. He's third generation. Oh, Rusty. Russell Grove. This was Russell the third. He was in charge of the treatment plant. And I told him, I said, different times when we were in there, I'd say, "Rusty, get me out of this bag room." I said, "You need some help out there?" And down there at the treatment plant, I said, "Come in and get me." So every now and then I'd see him walking in through the plant there, and he'd come in and I said, here he goes. He's gone to the boss to see if he can get me. That's why he'd come back and he'd say, "God's a treatment plant." But anyhow, then he would do off days. So then I was in the treatment plant. And now who's my boss? John Volchak. Little Hitler, right? He's in charge of the treatment plant. So then I told the boss, Bill, forget what his last name was, the boss. I told him, I said, I told you I didn't want to work for John anymore. He said, "Well, I'll try to keep him away from you," he said. Then next thing you know, I said, hey, Bill, I said, guess who's my boss? Said John Volchek. I said, I thought you said you were going to keep him away from me. He said, well, I didn't have much choice there. Because now I have the boss that I didn't want. Just like when I left Maslow's, I had a boss that I didn't like. But they downsized me in there too. But I don't know if you knew who had the Hollywood Crafters up right across from where my son lives. Well, wood crafters, and the father had people, and then they'd make wooden stuff for like kids, toys, and they'd paint them and ship them different places. When I got to just like this one guy, it was because my son, he didn't live up there, he was living here at home. He worked there at Hollywood Crafters, my son did. And he liked a certain job of making these toys, like, and the owner, he had a son who was going to Penn State College, okay? So now when he was on vacation from his college, he'd come out there and work for his dad. He liked the job my son did. So his boss, my son's boss, would take my son off the job and put his son on the job. So now when I starting to dislike that guy, I don't even know the kid yet, right? He's a Penn Stater. Well, he graduated from Penn State, and guess who hired him? Maslow. He got to be my boss. I didn't even like the guy and didn't know him. Now I got him as my boss. The only thing good I could say about him was, if he had a problem, he'd call you in his office. It was just you and him. He wasn't embarrassing you in front of the whole group, That's the only good thing I could say about him. But anyhow, so he was my boss whenever I quit at Maslow's. But what happened was I was a scheduler in piece dye, and they dyed the carpet that they made, automotive stuff. So the guy was in piece dye, was Bill, forget what his name was, but he was the boss of the paint shop. Well, he had a order the dye that went into dyeing this carpet, and I didn't know it when I got on as a scheduler in Automat. I was a scheduler in the floor cover, and that was different. I didn't know there was 10 different shades of black dye, right? So I put down the amount of dye orders that I could put out, and you go by what was ordered, what you had to order. So I put all these dye orders out and sent them over there. They only had one shift on this job of mine. So I had to do for one second, third shift over in piece dye. Well, he was supposed to order this dye, the boss, but he's trying to cut corners, making his budget feel better. So he don't order way ahead of dye stuff. So now they put these dye orders out, and now they try to dye this stuff, and most of it takes black dye. Now he don't have any black dye. That's my fault. It's his fault. But he was the boss, see? So who's going to be, you're going to believe? They blame me. So now they say I'm not. There was dye kettles over there have to set idle at night then, because they can't dye that carpet because I said dye this color and it'll have black dye. It was his fault, but I get the blame for it. So that's when they took me off as scheduler, put this girl on. That plus her able to, So what they did was they cut my pay from a scheduler down to a clerk. Right? Minimum wage. And that's what I was working for when I was over in the mill when they went on strike.
Why did they go on strike? Why did they go on strike?
Well, they had two unions. They had textile union and electricians union.
Okay.
Well, more benefits for the people and different things. And this was the textile union. And the other union, what the people in the office was, I mean, whenever they give a raise, we'd get the raise before the union would allow the people to get the raise in their contract. Now they don't have a contract, but now, so they go on strike. And I had all these people that I knew who worked in the mill that asked me how we were doing, and I told them terrible. I had to tell them the truth. And then my sister says, why aren't you interested in that place burning down? I said, I didn't have too many fond memories of Nazareth.
Well, but I think the last time we spoke, you mentioned playing or winning a couple baseball championships and a bowling championship. What were those experiences?
That was pretty good. I mean, that was each department in there had bowling teams. Each department had a softball team. Okay. Then the whole company had a baseball team. Well, I couldn't hit a baseball. I played baseball in township when Bowling Springs had a baseball team way back when I was, and but I never could throw very well. I played right field. I didn't have a very good arm. What happened was when I was 12 years old, I was hunting with my uncle and his buddy, Lester Smith, the one that worked for in Mazda, plus a buddy of his that worked on there, Herbie Fetter, and we were hunting rabbits one day. They took me because, I'd be with an adult at 12 years old. So I was hunting down here in the South Mountain, and one of them guys jumped a rabbit. I was off the side. We were lined up. We weren't ahead of one another, right? But Herbie shot at a rabbit. I'm walking with my shotgun like this, and when he shot, just a second or two later, I felt a real pain in my right elbow. Of course, I was walking with my elbow sticking beyond my back, and when he shot, it ricocheted a couple different ways. They were shooting that way, come around, and hit me in the elbow. And the shot went right in my elbow. Number 6 killed shot. Of course, I panicked and then almost fainted. 12 years old. So I hollered, I'm shot, and I sat down, and I was all but fainted. And my uncle come over, and he started fanning me and stuff. I didn't quite pass out, but I almost did. And he said, what, I said, well, I'm shot. And rolled my sleeve up, and here I could see this little pellet hole right in my elbow. Right in the side of my elbow there. It's still in there. So they rushed me in here to the doctors. A doctor lived down in Front Street. Dr. Gamble. He didn't even give me a shot. He just put the needle in that hole and gave me a shot. But I still have that shot in there. And for years, it sort of felt like it was in the joint. You know what I mean? And I got to where I couldn't throw. Like a baseball, I couldn't really throw a line drive. Yeah. Say you play in the outfield and throw in the second base or something like that. So I didn't play baseball that much after I got with Maslin. I played softball.
Okay.
And they played with the 10 players. Roving outfielder. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yep. That's how I play.
And I used to play the roving fielder, and I played most of the time in right-handed batters. You play behind the shortstop, right? And a lot of times I'd get balls. I'd get by the shortstop, and I could throw them out at first base, and it was all I could do to throw over to first base from behind the shortstop, So one day, we were playing John Agee. He was a good buddy of mine. He's a past commander of VFW. I liked him. John was okay. He used to pitch for a finish department. And of course, I played with the Weave Shed 1 year, and a couple of years I played for the Office, Maslin's, the softball team. So one time, we had the bases. They had the bases loaded. John Agee was on third base. Okay. And Al Hench was our shortstop, and he was a good one. He was my boss at Maslin. He's gone. John's gone. Somebody, I don't know who it was, hit the ball, got by Al Hench. The shortstop came right to me in the first bounce, and I was frozen fielder right behind him. I picked the ball up quick and threw it home and got John Agee's post out at home plate. Well, the ball should have been a hit. You know, that was the highlights of my softball, throwing the guy out at home plate. But anyhow, we won the championship in softball a couple times, and once in bowling. There was a handicap bowling. I mean, he had some good bowlers in Maslin, and they had to give us points like every game. You know, it was a handicap. And one year we come up and we were playing a guy, he's still living in there, what's his name? Anyhow, he's a captain of the other team, and I was the captain of our team, and we kept score on bowling, and we had won one game and it had won one game, three game match, and was at the end of the season, and we were tied for first place, so there was nitty gritty, and we come up to the last game and was tie. Cletus Wise lived in there, pretty close where Rodin's funeral home is. One of the streets that goes over the Turner Road. Mm-hmm. But anyhow, the game was tied, right? So now you have to play, they say, two extra frames, play a tie-off. But Cletus, he's a hard nose. He was a good bowler, but when he let the 10 pin, he couldn't get it. He threw a big hook. You know, he'd miss the 10 point or 10 pin pretty much every time he'd have it. And it made him mad, you know, to do that. It was his own fault. But he wouldn't let us bowl them 2 frames until he checked that game. He checked every frame of that last game. I was keeping score and he was keeping score. And he couldn't find a point that was wrong. So it was still tie. But he thought maybe they could win by a point by somebody keeping score wrong. So then we played them 2 frames off, and we won. So we won the championship that year, and boy, I made him mad. But it was his own fault because he'd missed a couple 10 pins during the match, you know, because that was a hard side for him to do it. But so yeah, I got a nice sweater up there in my room that they gave me, and then the little plaques they gave you. But the one I treasured more than anything was softball, because I like to say it in softball. But they had some good softball players and they had some good bowlers, Maslin's. A couple of guys are still living.
Did you ever take your family to Hershey Park for the family days? Or?
Yep. My mom used to work there. Mm-hmm. My mom worked for her brother, Lester.
Yep.
When I was in the service. When I come home from the service, like I say, I was sending a allotment home to my mom, because, you know, 6 of us, and I was next to the oldest. I can't remember my brother Terry ever doing anything like that in the Navy, but I sent a allotment home to Mother and told her to use it for buying groceries and stuff for the family. And when I come home here, she'd put in a savings account for me. So then we had a bill down here, Reese's grocery store where Tony DeLuca is now. You know where Tony is? Front Street is a lawyer.
Okay.
Down Front Street. They had a grocery store there. We had a bill there, and we built an extra room on the house out there. I had an uncle, John Foose, he was a carpenter. He built a laundry room out there where we lived in Guts Hole, and we had an outstanding bill with him. So what I did was, I took my mother and we went around to the grocery store and see my uncle, and I paid them bills off, right? Like I say, I can't remember my brother Terry ever doing that. Anyhow, that wasn't the end of it. When I started going with my wife, it wasn't my wife yet. She didn't want me to go to see her family because she was one of 14. She was next to the baby. She had a brother younger than her, but she was the last one to pass away. She had Alzheimer's. All her family died of cancer except her. She had Alzheimer's. But anyhow, I found out after she finally allowed me to go over to her home in Prairie County, they had an outstanding bill at the grocery store over there. So I went around and paid that off. I wasn't even married to her yet. Then the people that had the store who were retired took him a couple of hours to find the receipts of the money they owed her. That they owed. So we sat there and talked to his wife while he was going through old papers. He probably never thought he'd get the money back there. So I paid that bill off. It wasn't, big, huge money, but it was, back then, a couple of dollars was a lot of money back when I was a kid. I used to work for a farmer for $2 a day. Because I lived in the country and everybody thought I was a farm boy, but I wasn't. I mean, I worked farm right down across the field from where we lived. When they were thrashing and stuff like that, I asked for the worst job. I'd thrown off the sheaves into feeding the machine. I grew up tough like, and I always had a temper. I fought with my two brothers. I can't believe that I did that. We lived in the same house together, my brother Terry and I, 2 years different. We didn't talk for a couple of years. Sitting at the table together, eating and not talk to each other. He went to the Navy and I went to the Army. We didn't talk. We went down to Harrisburg, picked him up at the bus station down there when he was in the Army, or Navy a little longer than I was in the Army. We met down there and we gave each other a hug and forgot about old times, which was great. But we could have both got killed because he's over in the Pacific. And then I tried to hurt my brother Tim, younger brother. But, I mean, we never got where we didn't talk, though. But I always had a temper, and I found out why. I mean, I get over that when I went to the Army, too. Then I could relive stuff that I had done at home that I shouldn't have never done. We always had an old battery radio, and my sister Faye, she liked to listen to the Amos and the Indian and all that kind of stuff way back then, and I like to listen to the Grand Ole Opry, which was on Saturday night, and by the time that Saturday came, the batteries had wore out on the radio, and I blamed it on Faye. And lots of times when home, she'd be listening to these other shows, and I'd turn the radio off on her. She'd get mad at me. One time she stuck me with a knife in my arm. That was something. Then my mother wanted to correct me one time. She was doing some sewing and stuff, and she had a pair of scissors in her hand, and she was giving me a bad time, and probably was correcting me, and I would walk by her, and she went to hit me with her hand that she had the scissors in, and she stuck me in the back with the scissors. She didn't mean to do that, but she did, you know. So I used to go down to my grandparents' place and listen to the Grand Ole Opry. I had an aunt, one of the 10 brothers and sisters that my mom was a member of, and she was crippled. Her one leg didn't grow. She had a baby leg on one side, so she had a crutch. She had 2 crutches, and she was used to doing stuff all the time, and she threw her one crutch away, and she only used the one crutch. She could do laundry, and she could walk up and down steps, and she walked from down there to Barmester's one field, where they lived next to the Stanley Barmester, and in the Bowling Springs and work, and they down at the end of the lake, they used to have a ribbon factory in that place, the old mill down there, and she'd walk in there to work with a crutch. And she got, by only using the one crutch, she got a hump on her back. And she just had just a little short leg on one side. She never got married. I called her my dear Aunt Ellie. She's nice. Then she went blind and with high blood pressure. And I'd go down there and listen to the Grand Ole Opry. I'd walk in and I'd say, "Hello, Aunt Ellie." I'd walk over and she'd take my hand and she'd say, "You're Pat." You know, she knew us all. She had a bright atmosphere about her handicap, but she was a dear aunt. But anyhow, it was tough growing up, I'll tell you. And the lane went back to Gutschall Road. It used to drift shut when snow clear up to the top of the fence. And I helped shovel snow 1 year there, and I was only 12 or 13 years old. And the township paid me, I think 25 cents an hour. Big bucks.
Yeah, better than working on the farm.
What I had to do was, we 7 times we had to shovel the lane open. I call it a lane and straight road. But what I had to do was I had to cut like steps to throw the snow up over top of the drifts. I couldn't throw it up from where I was digging it loose. I had to get up these steps and throw it. Didn't have snow fence back then. Yeah, it was tough. Farmers used to drive their horses right across the top of snow. Model A Fords back then. My mother had a couple of them. But yeah, she used to work for her brother in there at Madison's. When I come home from the service, I made her quit. Then I went in there to work. I used to pay her for, when I got out of service, then pay her, for doing my washing. Well, what I used to do was, you didn't have these liquid wash machines and stuff like that. I used to be the man. And the ringers, I was a washer and ringer. Take the clothes out and hang them on the line. Yeah, like I say, I could always say I love my mom, but I can't say I love my dad. But he was I think it was World War I that done him in. But he used to really get radical. When he lived down in Churchtown, he used to get the shotgun after my mom. And one time he lost it out in the yard. And my uncle, Uncle Lester, he lived down the street from me in Churchtown. And he come up and he found this shotgun. I have it. Model 12 gauge. I wanted to buy it from my dad a long time ago, but why should I sell it to you? He said, someday it'll be yours. So I got it. And I have in my will, my grandson gets my guns. I don't have a whole bunch, but I have 2 shotguns, two long rifles, a 30-30 and a 270. I I got an old Model 94 30-30, and then two 22s, and then I got a pistol. That's all the weapons I have. I can't hit the broadside of a barn out of the pistol. I used to shoot. I used to take it fishing with me. I had Bud loaded me up some shotgun shells for the pistol. It's a .357 mag, and I'd carry that with me when I'd go fishing, because I used to fish a mountain creek up to Holly, and up there, water snakes would fall off the limbs down over your rod. I used to carry the pistol to shoot the water snakes. I never shot one of them. Snakes. They're always too fast for me. But I used to fish Mountain Creek pretty well, regular. But, yeah, it was a tough life, but like I say, the good Lord took care of me. But like that one guy, that Starner, used to load skids up there for me. He told me, he said, you know, I always thought I could build skids, you know, powder regular like I. He said, you know, you do a pretty good damn job, he said. So that made me feel good, because he's pretty good. He was just a young guy. But then I had a guy that used to be what they call Mr. America. He lived up in the Holly. Can't think his name now, but he was a part-timer for me one day. You ought to saw the muscles on that guy. Guess where I put him? Building skids. Put him on that. He had short sleeve shirts, and boy, he'd stand out there and flex his muscles while he's waiting for another bag to come. He'd take that bag and just set it up there. He was a big guy. But he was a bully too. He'd get in the fights up in the hall, and they had fights, drinking. What was his name? I can't think his name, but one day I went up there to get a haircut, and him, I didn't know it was him at the time, but him and another guy must come through the light up there, and it wasn't cut the other one off, so the sharp, you know, almost had a wreck. They both pulled off the street up there and started shouting at one another, you know. But I was just standing there watching them. I thought, cause this husky guy was one of them. But I mean, I thought they were going to fight, you know. But they were just mouth fighting. But they were blaming the other guy for, but it wasn't an accident, but it was almost. I used to go up there and get my hair cut. I go down here now, it's the end of the street, Walnut Street. Girl, she a lady doctor, or a lady hair cutter. She does perms, and she'll cut men's hair too. And she's cheaper than the lady that lives down Ray Street. I don't go up to Hall anymore. Firm goes up to the Hall and gets his hair cut, and he said that guy asks about me every now and then. What I used to do is Bud would take me up after I lost my license, and he'd sit up there. His wife cuts his hair, and Bud plays the guitar. And this guy cuts hair up there. He has a guitar. And after he found out that my son plays the guitar, he brings his guitar up. He was living somewhere else, but now somebody said he moved up here to Hawley. I don't go up there anymore, but anyhow, he used to bring his guitar there, and then when I'd go up to haircut, he'd get Bud to play his guitar while I was getting my haircut. And it'd be sitting full guys, you know, in there. My son, he'd be sitting there picking. I played the guitar a little bit, but I haven't played for a long time. Got it sitting in the room here, and I learned it off my uncle. He never was a very good guitar player. Yeah, it's almost 4 o'clock.
I was going to say, we've been talking even longer than last time.
Yeah, you're outdoing yourself. You want to make it a final.
Yeah.
Do I have to fill another paper?
I have another one for you. Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, we'll wrap it up here. Thank you again for talking with me today. It's been a real pleasure.